Thank you everybody. Thank you for joining us today, especially to Mr. Cooch, Doug Bruce, John Crawford, Julie and David for joining us on this little occasion. Thank you very much. So I just want to say a few words. So this year we are celebrating 25 years of existence of the LIT. The LIT all came about because of EU Regulation 820 of 1997, requiring the traceability to farm of origin for all beef and beef products traded in the EU as of 1st January 2000. And this was on the back of mad cow concerns, and essentially it's a QA system to assure consumers. And this naturally was going to have a huge impact on Zimbabwe, because under the Lome Agreement we had the ability to have a preferential trade agreement of exporting 9,100 metric tons of beef per year. So as a result of that, a livestock working group was established in '98, and I clearly remember when I was still working at CSC at Metopus, being invited to CSC Bulawayo, and Ian Frood was brought in. He was from the Meat and Livestock Commission in the UK, and he was talking to us about LITs. And I remember the one piece of advice he gave us is put in the bare minimum you need. Let the auditors tell you, no, you need to change the wooden wheels and put on pneumatic wheels, or you need to put an engine in it. So soon following that, the trust was established in 1999. So 3 unions were represented: Johnny Haynes representing CFU, Abdul Nyati, the ZFU, Ishmael Chikwineri, the ICFU, which then became the ZCFU, 2 Ministry of Agriculture representatives, the most important being the competent authority, the DVS, and that was Stuart Hargreaves, and Basilio Sandamo representing markets and economics. CSC being the exporter, represented by Lawrence Masanga. Auctioneers, Alistair Smith, and I'm really grateful that John, his nephew, is here. John in his capacity as chair or vice chair of ZHB, but also linked with Alistair. And NADF then became ZADF, represented by Mike Burr. So we then, the first body to be established was the Board of Management, which was chaired by Doug Bruce. And he had done a lot of work studying QA. So he was very well briefed on what was needed, and was an excellent person to chair that board. Carol Miller had a huge input, and over the weekend, I remember on Friday we disappeared, and over the weekend she came up with the scheme rules. And it was a fascinating scheme rules where we phased in traceability, because remember, we are now 1999, it had to be traceable to farm of origin, 1st January 2000. What do we do with the animals already in the feedlot? What do we do with the animals that were already born or going to go into the feedlot? And all these things, and that's what this clever thing did, is came up with the scheme rules of how to gradually bring it in. We had Tim Reynolds, he was the CPA vice chair, and he was there to make sure we kept it to a minimum. We would like this. Who's paying for it? Don't know, kick it out. And that way and that was, to me, one of the biggest lessons we learned. Be very clear on your objectives and build the machine to meet your objectives, and don't worry about all the frills, because that's what trips you up. And then Stuart Hargreaves, not only was he on the trustees, but he was in the Board of Management. And we were very, very lucky, because he was one of 10 authors of the OIE Terrestrial Animal Health Code. And he had a very complete understanding of what LITs meant from an EU perspective. Then the Board of Management, chaired by yours truly, interviewed me, and I started work 25 years ago on Monday, 16th August 1999. My first office was a little office at CPA. Hilda Gera, who regrettably is in Kariba and is very upset she can't be with us today, was already employed, and she was looking at the new brands. We had introduced a new brand and we wanted that to be our property identification code. Hilda, an absolutely amazing lady with a photographic memory. I can remember one occasion we were trying to understand something from 2 years ago, and Hilda said, "But don't you remember this went there and that was paid for there?" And how she remembered that, I don't know. So Alistair Smith, at that time of being trustee, he was also chair of the Zimbabwe Agricultural Society, and he managed to arm twist ZAS to let us use these offices on a temporary basis. Now, these offices were used once a year for tickets for all the exhibitors and everything. So the August show was over. We were September knocking around. September, October, we moved in. It didn't go well with next door. And I remember in the early days, we would shut up the office, move everything to Meatmark, which is, I can't even remember exactly where it was, but behind Colcom. So that was how we operated. So as we started funding, we had no funding, and CFU CPA came in at the 11th hour and gave me a 2 million grant stroke loan, 1 million grant, 1 million loan. And I have a memory of a $500,000 going into the server and the software. The software was Oracle, that our computer database needed to run on Oracle. We spent another $500,000 on the office furniture, printers, and PCs. Another $500,000 on a vehicle, and I managed to buy that Peugeot 306, and about $500,000 for office expenses and startup. So when we came to the EU, the LITs, we copied what the EU was doing. We said, let's not reinvent the wheel. And the first thing was the twin tagging, and that's what we mimicked. So the first thing we did, we went to tender and tendered for the supply of tags, and Allflix came in as a winner. And I remember we had a dossier about this big from Allflix, and I still have it in the cupboard there. And what struck me was their R&D budget to make this was $2 million US a year. Just the research and development into this. Had to be tamper-proof, laser printed, last the lifetime of the animal. So when we started, we had already a huge number of tags pre-sold. I hadn't even ordered the first lot of tags, and we had a batch sold. I had money in the bank. And I was getting to a point where I was ordering tags in batches of 50,000 a time every 2 to 3 weeks. That's 30, 40,000 US every 2 to 3 weeks, just ordering and trying to keep up. So my office, you see that marking here, my office was in the back here. This office here, there was a big safe here, and around the safe and all here was tags. Okay, and we'll come on to the story on tags just now. So I was very quickly introduced to the money market. The money we were getting in, we had to invest, had to keep the value of the money. We opened a special account at HSBC to make sure we could finance our purchases. So just as a matter of interest, I am now ordering 3,000 to 5,000 tags every 4 to 6 months, just to give you an idea of the change. Again, when we came to the database, we looked at what was already functional. We didn't have time to develop our own software, go that route. And while we were looking for software, the dairy industry asked us to look at a milk performance recording program. The system they got from Canada in the early 80s was not guaranteed to be Y2K compliant. Do you remember those guys? When we were moving from the late 90s, we were all Y2K and as a Y2K compliant. And we came across a program called IRIS, or as my Luxembourg colleague called IRIS. And IRIS, a Dutch program, handled traceability and milk performance recording. So Nathan Wari, who was heading up the Zimbabwe Dairy Services Association under Pat Borland, in charge of the milk performance recording scheme, and we traveled to Luxembourg. We met up with Gilbert Nice, and he showed us the program in operation in Luxembourg, took us across to Holland. We met Hans Wilmink of CL Data, the chief animal breeder there, who showed us the program. Then when we came to IT, again we went to tender, and the tender was awarded to Roger Ivy, and we had an excellent relationship with Roger. So he put in place this fancy server. It was in the back office, around just behind where Faith is, somewhere there. If you look on the floor, you'll see 4 holes. When we put that server in, we put a cage around it. It was so important, with a fancy lock. Okay, and we had the office hugely alarmed. Joe Fontec came in and alarmed it, and it saved us. The one evening there was an attempted break-in, and it saved us. But interesting, when we were signing up for this program, Holland asked us to wait 6 months and not take IRIS 2.3, which was the latest system running in Luxembourg. Wait for IRIS 3 because South Africa and Ireland had signed up with the beef module, which would be coming out in 6 months. And we said, we can't wait. We want to start. Thank God, because IRIS 3 came out 4 years later. And at that time, our need had dropped down, and we were offered it for 53,000 euros. Needless to say, we stayed with IRIS 2.3. So all of this was being guided by the Board of Management, and I remember meeting at a CPA boardroom downstairs, meetings going on till 9, 10 at night with Stuart Hargreaves, thrashing this out, and then from there we had a very bumpy roadshow. We went around the country explaining what is LITS, why, and we got some grief. And I remember very clearly where Reneth is sitting now is where I was sitting with my desk. Do you remember that funny oak link? That's where I had my printer on it, and I was visited by Sam and Janet Kaywood, who gave me a serious lecture on the check digit, and what a stupid idea that was. So staff, I've mentioned Hilda Gera. She was absolutely amazing, starting us off. The brands, tag orders, receipting, it was going crazy. Reception. We also brought on the data capture team from ZDSA, so that was Mishak Piri, Mavuto Banda, Edmore Maramwidzi. There was a 4th guy who joined us, and at Christmas the first year he went to the States and he never came back. I can't remember his name. So that was our data capture team from ZDSA. Jean Beale came through from CC Sales, so she was helping with accounts, an office manager. There was cubicles here. Jean was the first one. TK, I remember soon after we moved here, TK arrived on a 5-ton truck. He went to work, and he was informed, there's a truck, put your impasha on the truck, you're going. So poor Mr. TK was very, very perturbed at the way he was treated. But Mr. Fredericks knew I needed someone special to keep the fort here. And thank God he sent me TK. And I remember TK sitting in there. That was his tag office there. He kept the table at an angle. And this was Thomas's kingdom. All the tag boxes were here. He would get the tag orders from the front office. It would be on a piece of paper, and he would go and dig out the different boxes, because it wasn't just a matter of taking the next tag. It was trying to make sure we didn't repeat the last 4 digits. So Mr. Thomas would have to dig in different boxes for all the different tags. And then from there, obviously, Mr. Kuch became our office elder. He was our wise man, and he was the one, whenever we had a problem like City of Harare licensing, we sent Mr. Kuch to go and sort them out. And he sorted them out. Thank you, Mr. Kuch. Sharon joined soon after to assist with the putting in place the systems. We needed systems. All the tags, the tag orders, who's paid, who's collected, and who's received. And then, but also we had several meetings. So we had minutes and agendas. We had memos that needed to be edited, and that all went out. And then Mr. Kuch found God knows soon after, and he came to look after our office and has since become our chief chef, and a special beans on Tuesday and Thursday. Won't forget that. That was the introduction by Mr. Fredericks when we were starting. Remember those days where you couldn't find meat, and it was a problem. And that's when let them eat beans. So that became the Tuesday and Thursday let them eat beans. So then Florence joined us in early 2000, the youngest person. She hadn't even turned 18 and joined us. And I seem to recall Florence was just before the entrance here at the beginning, but then soon after it was too chaotic, and Florence with Christine Smith was doing one of our biggest and most important things, was the passports. And the passports was to make sure that the animal that the farmer wanted to send to the abattoir was eligible for export, had met all the requirements. So Florence was next to Jean Beale with Christine Smith. I remember them with their big books. So farmer would send in a list of saying, I intend sending these 10 of these 50 animals. Christine and Florence would go through and check, make sure every single animal was correct, issue a passport and send the passport to the respective abattoirs, so that when the animal arrived at the abattoir, they knew the animal was eligible for processing for export. So, at the peak, we had 23 people in here and there. And I just want to make mention of Roger Ivies. So he helped us with an automation program. He helped us with quite a few programs. We are still using the office automation program today, where we can track every single tag that's been sold. So other major projects that we launched, Price Equalization Fund, which was aimed to ensure that producers who were in the red zone achieved equitable prices for their animals. So that was a big project that we brought in. And the other big one we brought in was mobile units, where we had a team under Les Mallet. We had 4 Land Rovers. They tested in Mondoro and went out with several functions: information dissemination, branding, the vet branding, making sure the animals were compliant with the rules of the land. And then, if they wanted, tagging and registration. For me, one of the memorable occasions was passing the EU audit. So this is the file we prepared in January 2001. We were audited by the EU, and this is a full documentation. And it's starting with our letter of authority from the DVS to identify and trace animals, the EU regulation 820 of 97, the deed trust, the scheme rules booklet, the scheme rules, the software, the tag system, the mobile units, our accounts, audited accounts, financial correspondence, and so on. And I remember Stuart Hargreaves was going around the country and he was at Chinoy University with the auditors. And at about 2 p.m. he called me and he said, I want a traceability or certificate of this animal. And he gave me the number. And he said, please deliver it to my office. So I quickly prepared the traceability certificate of that specific animal. I remember driving across before, going home and slipping the envelope under his door. And anybody who knew Stuart, if you wanted Stuart, you went to his office between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. And the best time to get Stuart was between 6 and 7. Otherwise, he was just too busy. We were very lucky. We were the first in the region to have LITs in place. Namibia came and visited us a number of years later, and they basically mimicked our system. So LIT has been home for the ZHB. ZHB moved in 2003, 2004. They shrunk down, they moved in. We set up Ag Labs. We set up the Livestock and Meat Advisory Council. We set up Zimbabwe Quality Assured Pork. So, this is an occasion for me to say a few thank yous to the chairpersons, Alistair Smith, Mark Hayter, Doug Bruce, Kevin Higgins, for their support, guidance. It's been a rocky road, it's been a long road. LIT has been a wonderful experience and has afforded me many opportunities to travel to many places in the world which I would have never dreamt of. I spent about a year in Brazil, a year in Georgia, a year in Ethiopia. I also had an opportunity to visit Azerbaijan, Mauritius, and South Sudan. So to this, thank you to all the staff for helping keep the ship afloat during my absence, and sincere thanks to Mr. Berry for running the fort at the background and making sure we took over. A very special thank you to Sharon, who came and helped me. At the beginning here, it was crazy, and I just wasn't coping. She came in, helping me put in systems and making sure everything ran smoothly, and came in on more than one occasion and bailed us out. But perhaps the most important time she bailed us out is when we left Ag Labs at 2007. Sharon came back in office at 2008, possibly one of the darkest hours that we faced in this country. I said cheers, disappeared to Brazil, and Sharon kept the office open during that very, very difficult time. So with that, thank you all. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being with me on this wonderful journey. Thank you. 25 years.
Cheers. And counting.
Of LITs. Cheers. Yes.
So, Maria, I think it's only appropriate that I say a few words. Little did I know when Alistair and I interviewed you were one of 3 candidates, that we'd be talking to each other all these years later. So for me, it was the best guy I ever employed.
Thank you, David.